All right. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today, this Tuesday, for our second of 4 webinars to educate about Senate Bill 752. Thanks, everyone, for hopping on. And we're going to kick it off with a video to get us started.
We begin this hour with one of the biggest hip hop artists in the game, Meek Mill. A law that he and his organization, the Reform Alliance, fought for took effect in Florida last month. It allows people to shorten their probation term by getting credits by going to school or working at least 30 hours a week. The law also allows people to check in remotely with their probation officers. Mill was
So there's a real problem with our probation system, how big it is, how bureaucratic it is. And what we saw were real solutions that were put on the table, conversations that happened across the board with unlikely allies everywhere in the state. And ultimately that momentum led to 100% support on one side, 100% support on the other side, and a signature by the governor.
It allows these probationers to report in with their probation officer virtually via Zoom or whatever other platform the Department of Corrections has.
Being a good family member, developing your social network, getting a job, going to school, all those kind of things become much harder rather than easier when you don't have remote reporting.
This financially takes the stress that you don't have to take a day off work, especially if you have to travel to get to a probation office. It allows for, consistency in their employment. It's great for business owners. It's great for the employers.
So the workforce achievement credits basically create a system in which if you meet a certain criteria in terms of how much work you're doing, you can get 30 days off of your probation. And trust me, as somebody who's been on probation, every single hour, every single day matters.
You need a job anyways to survive, right? So if I can, work, get paid from working and get credit to get on probation early, guess what? I'm working. I might get 2 jobs. For every education course that you complete, that's 60 days off your probation.
Whether it be college courses or vocational, all of those things will give them some credit toward their probation serve. Studies show, again, that people with stable employment and these forms of education are less likely to get in trouble again. In addition to the House members and the senators working collaboratively to pass these bills, it also requires members of the community and other stakeholders and other interested groups to really work and push.
With unlikely allies coming together and having conversations, and lo and behold, you see policy come out of it that really will impact people's lives in a positive way.
Reward people for doing the right thing is incentive for them to do more right.
I can't help but have a positive impact.
Right now, our probation system has a lot of challenges, and this is a great step to ultimately fix that system so that people can truly re-enter the community and prosper. And when people prosper, when they re-enter the community, everybody benefits.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So we'll go ahead and get started with our first speaker, Tammy Marcus. Oops. Actually, we'll strike that, reverse it. Hello, Representative. Representative Fullwood and Reggie Fullwood, who is the Operation New Hope CEO, and we worked very closely with them to help get this bill passed. So I'll kick it over to you, Rep.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late. Really want to appreciate the work that Reform has done at pulling this together over the last several years. I think we got involved about 3 years ago, and it's been, just critical work for us. And so I really can't thank the team enough. And I know there's a lot of people that have been involved. So, for us, we do reentry work and we get people on the back end. But if we could fix a lot of the stuff on the front end through policies like this, through legislation changes, through reform, then it'll help the work that we're doing on the back end significantly. And more importantly, it'll keep people out of the system or, reduce the time that people are in the system. So SB 752 was really critical, to me, it's a first step bill because we're really focusing on misdemeanors. And there's so many more folks who have, felonies or charges that really we should be considering. But it's a really good step in the right direction, because if we can get legislators and folks who are sort of still skeptical about this work, that we can get them to start taking these baby steps. Because that's the reality of it. A lot of them aren't ready to do the wholesale reform efforts. So it's incremental change. And so I look at SB 752 as part of that incremental change. And it'll be significant for some Floridians who are unfairly stuck, serving time or on these probationary periods that aren't really realistic. I know we have clients who come through our doors who may have 10 years probation, and they've been doing well for 7, 8 years, and I'm looking at them like, okay, you haven't had any charges, you've been a great citizen all this time, and you still have 3 or 4 years of probation left. I mean, and so they're trying to better their lives, through either workforce development programs, educational programs. So a bill like this will help those folks who are really stuck in this rut of the supervision to get out of that supervision sooner, quicker. And so many of them can, they have more flexibility in their jobs with their family time. They just become more productive citizens, through this bill and being able to get off, or basically gaining time back for good behavior. And so I think it's really, again, I think this bill is definitely a step in the right direction. And it directly impacts a lot of the folks that we serve. And oftentimes we don't see a lot of folks with misdemeanors that come through the doors, but we do get folks with misdemeanors who have these extremely long probationary periods that just really aren't fair. So this bill really sets the stage for that, and I'm excited about the next couple of years. And the folks who are involved in this know it's really about leadership. In Florida is really about, if you can convince the Speaker of the House and the Senate President that this is important, then we can get some traction. The governor has shown some support for reentry. We've gotten support from the governor's office, but this kind of reform movement, the bills that really matter, like fixing driver's license, fines and fees, this gain time bill, these are the things that will have an immediate impact on literally thousands of Floridians. So again, this is definitely a step in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Representative, and congrats to Operation New Hope on the opening of your new Orlando facility yesterday.
Yes.
I look forward to coming and seeing it here in the next month or so.
Right.
Now we'll kick it over to Tammy Marcus. She is the Florida Police Benevolent Association Correctional Probation Officer Chapter President. That's a mouthful, and we've been working with this whole time too. So take it away, Tammy.
Yes, it was probably about a year ago. A lot of people, the burning question I get is, how did PBA get involved with this collaboration? And it was actually, Katie about a year ago approached Matt Puckett, a lobbyist with PBA, about support for this piece of legislation. And Matt says, well, I don't know much about probation, but I'll get you in touch with someone who does. You need to speak with our probation officer president, chapter president. Yes, I have been the chapter president for the PBA probation officer chapter for about 4 years now, on the board in some aspect for about 16 years with PBA. But more importantly, I'm one of the probation officers that worked for Department of Corrections, going on 31 and a half years, with 21 of that as a supervisor. So we knew this criminal justice reform was coming. And in the probation world, we live it, and it's our operation day to day. So when you think about it, it makes sense to come to the folks that are having to deal with all the reform and reentry. I mean, because on a daily basis, that's essentially what we do. So there's about 2,000 probation officers statewide supervising about 146,000 offenders. And prior to COVID, it was about 167,000 offenders on some form of community supervision. So, so I linked up, met Katie with Reform. She presented this very comprehensive piece, draft, and I say comprehensive because it included everything but the kitchen sink. And I mean that in a good way, because it included, and as I read it, things that we were already doing here in Florida. We were already doing the remote reporting way before COVID. In its original format, it was called independent reporting status, where those minimum class offenders could go in and report remotely and not have to come into the office. They had to remain in compliance to stay in that. And now we've migrated to, we call it IOTS. It stands for Interactive Offender Tracking System. And again, it's now web-based using biometrics. So again, they can report remotely. We're already doing alternative sanctions, merit-based activity for our folks on house arrest. So, you know, as I read this piece, I'm like, wow, we're really doing all these things that this group, you know, wants to present. But there was the only piece that we weren't doing was the credits off the sentence for like educational or employment credits. And probably a part of the reason was that our database, because in the beginning, the group, the legislation draft called for, I think, credits on a monthly basis. And with our 40-year-old system, I mean, we would have been correcting those sentence structures in our, you know, outdated database for, you know, we would lose track of the supervision aspect. So, you know, there was a lot of pieces in there that, you know, I'm like, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. And, you know, we're not going to do this because even though we're in the second chance business, we're also in the public safety business. So things like giving time off sentence to folks on sex offender probation, you know, the career offenders, habitual offenders, you know, that was some things, you know, we kind of had a little heartburn with, and, you know, had to add some exclusions because, like I said, the beginning, it was very comprehensive. It didn't have those exclusions. Also, you know, identified to the group, there's some folks that we supervise that, you know, we courtesy supervise. So we don't have the authority even to take off time their sentence. Those people coming out of prison on conditional release, those are under Florida Commission on Offender Review. So once we got past all those things, you know, we narrowed it down and came up with a really good piece that we could submit, which, you know, when you think about it, when they talk about the partners and, you know, the shareholders, it really was good because, you know, we were in on the beginning of it at the front end, and instead of it going to session and, you know, us drawing those lines in the sand and having those hard conversations in the committee hearing. So, you know, by the time we went, it was a nice piece, passed unanimously. You know, it was a wonderful thing. And I think it's going to be, you know, a good, you know, piece for us for supervision for the folks that we supervise. To get them to get employed or, you know, complete an apprenticeship program and earn those credits and, you know, to successfully get off supervision and, you know, essentially get off our caseloads. So, you know, I want to thank Katie for reaching out to Matt and, you know, including us on that piece of legislation that, you know, I feel like we helped craft and come to something that we could essentially and realistically do.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Well, thank you so much, Tammy. It was an honor and a pleasure to work with you and make sure that the PBA had a seat at this table and that we collaborated to make something that was workable and benefited all parties. So thanks so much for your work and your institutional knowledge. It was incredibly helpful. Speaking of institutional knowledge, next up is Rachel Goldstein. She works for Reform Alliance as our senior implementation manager, and she's going to talk about implementation of SB 752 and dig a little deeper into what's in it.
Thank you, Katie. So I want to first start off my portion speaking about how reform ended up in Florida. So just a little background on the state of Florida and its community supervision system. So Florida has the 5th largest probation population in the country. At the end of 2020, 1 in every 98 adults in Florida were on some form of supervision. And as of January of 2022, approximately 94,000 individuals were on state felony probation and nearly 5,000 on state misdemeanor probation. And I want to take a minute to clarify how the system functions in Florida, because each state with community corrections functions a little differently. So in Florida in particular, the Florida Department of Corrections oversees felony probation and some misdemeanor cases, a lot of times that were pled down from original charges that were felonies, but there's also local probation that's run by the counties that oversees lower level misdemeanor cases. So the Florida Department of Corrections and those local counties function separately from one another. So I think that's just an important distinction before we get into the nitty gritty of the legislation. So according to the Florida Department of Corrections, the median felony person under supervision serving a felony sentence is serving at least a 3-year sentence on probation, while the average sentence is a little greater than 4 years. So people are on for a decent amount of time. In terms of earned credits, when we were looking to see and working with our partners on the ground and with the Florida Safety Coalition and looking into earned credits, there are 18 states, other states that have these credits, including other southern states like Mississippi, South Carolina, Louisiana, Missouri, and Texas, where there has been, great impact from those earned credits. And so learning from the states that had already implemented those credits to get time off was really helpful in kind of the behind the scene research that was happening. A couple other interesting statistics in Florida. So within the first 3 years of being placed on community supervision, many Floridians are convicted of a new crime, and nearly 40% of people will see their supervision revoked while serving their term of supervision. And within the Florida Department of Corrections, there's another form of supervision called community control, which is a little more compliance oriented, and those folks only have about a 28% success rate. And as we know through research that a lot of times when people come onto supervisions and they might have some technical violations, they usually those violations happen within the first 1 to 2 years of their supervision. So just some background again on how we ended up in Florida, and really we're so thankful that we had an amazing coalition come together that really helped us understand what was happening on the ground in Florida in practice to really create and draft this legislation that was unanimously passed, which is just such a huge accomplishment. So I would now like to move into more details about the provisions in the legislation. So Tralisha, if you don't mind sharing our slides, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. So the first, we're going to talk about earned credit. So this is for people on, again, Florida Department of Corrections, state probation or community control. So again, this is run by the state, different than if you're on local supervision. So if you're on local misdemeanor supervision, the credits do not apply, but they do apply for all state probation and community control. And people are eligible to obtain education credits, which result in a 60-day reduction of their term of supervision. And that's if they're compliant on supervision, and to earn those education credits, you must complete some sort of vocational degree, diploma, college classes, or any other programs approved by the Florida Department of Corrections. So that's how you earn 60 days off for your education credits. And the research shows in community corrections that the more people value and obtain more education, that the likelihood of their success increases a great amount. And we obviously want people to have long-term success way beyond supervision. And so these credits are a great incentive for not only people under supervision, but a tool for officers as well to work with the people they serve to really encourage people to explore different areas that they might want to learn more about. So the next type of credit is the workforce achievement credit. So again, this is any person under state probation or community control is eligible to obtain workforce achievement credits, which results in a 30-day reduction. So to get that 30 days, you have to, again, be compliant with your terms and conditions of supervision. And you must work consistently for a 6-month period, averaging 30 hours per week in a paid position. So as long as you're working consistently those 30 hours, if you work some sort of construction job and let's say you're laid off during the rainy season, as long as you're averaging those 30 hours over the 6 months, you should be able to gain those 30 days off your supervision. Also, technically too, if you work multiple part-time jobs at 30 hours per week, like I said, the average is what's most important. The benefits to earn credits, obviously the goal is that people's supervision will be shorter if they can obtain these credits. It's also a good way to stay motivated when on supervision and really working towards a goal. For officers, it gives them more tools in their tool belt to build healthier working relationships with the people they serve, but also incentivizing pro-social behavior and things that are going to help not only the person they serve, but the community at large to build those safer communities. Next slide, please. So the remote reporting provision in SB 752 is for both state and local probation. So this is for every type of probation, both state run by the Florida Department of Corrections and local probations are run by the county. So this gives state and local probation authorities to create a permanent remote reporting system. Like Tammy said, a lot of jurisdictions already had some form of remote reporting. This provision allows it to be permanent and asks jurisdictions to have a written policy in place to really codify what's expected around remote reporting. And what's great about remote reporting is it's an expanded tool, again, for officers to conduct meetings and compliance checks with people under supervision virtually and also using other approved technology platforms. And remote reporting can mean a lot of different things. It can mean people using the telephone to call and check in. It could be mailing in monthly reports. It could be emails or some sort of online reporting, kiosks, virtual check-ins using Zoom. So it's really a big umbrella and jurisdictions make their own decisions of how they're going to utilize remote reporting. But there's, more importantly, I think, great benefits to remote reporting for both the people on supervision and also officers as well. So some of those benefits is a more flexible schedule. So as we know, a lot of people work during the day or might have some weird work schedules, and it allows officers and people under supervision to meet maybe at times that they wouldn't be able to come to the office. So that's one. It also helps reduce barriers. A lot of people on supervision have issues around transportation or finding babysitters. And so it allows flexibility and also to help reduce barriers so people can really be successful on supervision. It also allows officers, it can be a mixed approach. Some people might be reporting might be reporting once a month, or they can use remote reporting intermittently, where some people might be on an administrative caseload and they're just mailing in every month. So it can be used in different ways. So that is remote reporting in a nutshell. And lastly, if we go to the last slide, you might be asking, well, how do you get involved with reform and how to become a reformer? So you can text reform, all in caps, to 81411, and follow us on Instagram. We're on Twitter, all the social media. But once you sign up, you'll get newsletters, you'll learn what we're doing in other states, initiatives we're working on. And we do have some cool things if you are under supervision, some cool programs and things that you can get involved in. So I just hope that, you know, you definitely text reform to 81411 so we can see you and really build our community and make more change happen across the country. So thank you. And Katie, I'll turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. Now that we have gotten the bill across the finish line and it's in the phase of implementation, it's in very good hands. With your background in federal probation as a federal probation officer, and you're just a wealth of knowledge. So I really look forward to seeing with this incremental changes in the bill a year from now, 2 years from now, the numbers. And I know you'll be working very hard also with the Department of Corrections to make sure that these credits are being used. And so also too about the text 81411, the word reform in all caps. This will also be recorded, as will the other three of these. So if you work in reentry, if you know many on supervision that want to learn more, you can always access these two on our website. So just keep that in mind. But next up is a friend of mine, Lance Wissinger. Also, I think we met about actually as the bill was moving when you were up at the Capitol for Florida FRC's Capital Day, who I know you've worked with them, and now you work with another partner of ours that we love so much, Americans for Prosperity, there in Tampa Bay. And you have some firsthand experience that we're grateful that you're going to share with us today. So I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. And I appreciate everybody on this call that is talking about really kind of where it's come from on the top down. You know, looking, I appreciate Representative Fullwood and his input, and Ms. Marcus and her describing exactly what happened on their end. I want to talk about some of the real world effects of what's happening with this. So to give you a little bit of my background, I was in the policy department for the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition and helped with Amendment 4, several other things since then. I now work for Americans for Prosperity as a grassroots engagement director in Tampa Bay, and helping with criminal justice on that front. The way I got into that was the old-fashioned way, as my friend Neil used to say, I got a felony. So I have a DUI manslaughter charge. It was a terrible charge that I made a mistake. I got in an accident and lost my friend in the accident. I did 5 years in prison and 5 years on probation. Rocky road getting through all of that, but once I got to prison, I realized that there's a way through, and so I got involved and started to get into programs. If there was a program available, I took it. I wanted to make use of all my time. I read almost 500 books. I made it to 496 books while I was in there. I wanted to educate myself. I wanted to go to school. I was able to bring programs into the system as an incarcerated individual because I saw the benefits of having something else to do rather than sit on my bunk and read a book and smoke cigarettes if I wanted to. That was really the few things that was available. I kind of started to reach out and find what really interested me, but also how was I able to help the guy next to me? How was I able to help the guys around me in the dorm? So programs came available. I started a Toastmasters program to help guys be able to do job interviews. Some of these guys were in the work release center and they're getting close to the end of their time, and they got to find a job or they got to go back to a main unit and back into the full prison system. So they're getting nervous, but they've never done a job interview before. So we worked on those skills. We help people write business plans. We help people have better relationships with their parents or with their kids. I was lucky enough with my background. I was a chef for a long time and started a program through our culinary program at the Work Release Center and represented the United States in a culinary competition and won a silver medal for the Chef of the Americas. So these programs were not available, but they were things that I found ways to get done. And so with this new bill, this gives an opportunity for all of that stuff that I was able to do to have an incentive to be able to do those, not just because I want to do it, because I could have got home, earlier. I could have been able to get off probation earlier. So there was a lot of opportunity for me to do something, but only because I was able to go after that and because I was incentivized of my own to make myself better. When I went to prison, I was a completely different person than when I came out. And when I went on probation, I worked in the restaurant industry. Not the best place to go if you're in recovery, to go into the restaurant industry, but you're going to get a job regardless of your criminal background in the restaurant industry, one way, shape, or form. I was lucky enough to get a really good job out on Sanibel Island in Fort Myers area. But I was, during season, it was 2.5 hours for me to get from the island back to check in with my probation officer, to turn around and drive another 2.5 hours to get back out there and finish my shift, because we're a skeleton crew. There's 6 of us in the entire kitchen. So I would have to leave in the middle of the day and go do what I needed to do at probation to just show up. They see my face, turn out. Remote reporting would have changed my life. Remote reporting would have made it so much better for me to be able to just check in and not have to leave my job and leave the other 5 guys to make up for that spot that I was not able to fill on those days where I had to go check in. I took a couple notes from what Representative Fullwood said, and this is a great step of improving and including moving forward. So as we're able to improve on this bill and really incorporate more people to be available, or that are available to it, we're going to have a better, more vibrant society. We're going to have people that actually want to do something and break that cycle of criminal justice, where you don't have to necessarily go back to the circumstances that led you to incarceration in the first place, because now you've been incentivized to get an education, to keep your job, to find a better job. I was so motivated by some of the stuff that I started my own mentor program, where people like myself that have been through the system and found success are able to go back in and help some of these guys that are coming out, especially the ones that aren't on probation. So we're able to go through and really give these guys, use me as an example. One of my favorite things is my Facebook 10-year challenge is a picture of my prison ID and then a prison of me sitting on the Senate floor in Tallahassee. I never thought I'd be able to do that while I'm sitting on my bunk in a prison cell. So the fact that I've been able to go through, make improvements, see the difference of what's just small opportunities. It was a Toastmasters group, and we started talking about getting jobs, and that improved to now there's guys from that group that work with Tony Robbins and doing motivational speaking and do TED Talks about their experience from that group that we started in the Work Release Center. The biggest thing that stuck with me from what Rep Fullwood was gaining time back, because the whole time you're incarcerated, the whole time you're on probation, all you want to do is get to the end. And if you're able to knock some of that time off, man, are you excited? I remember counting down, it was 11 days till I'm released, or 10 days until I'm off probation. Those are the longest 10 and 11 days I've ever had in my life, because it's so close and you can almost feel it, but you're not quite there. So to have the opportunity of man, I'm going to knock an extra 60 or 30, 90 days, whatever it is, off because I improved myself in the process. This is a no-brainer. And this is such a good program that we can improve on and keep incentivizing and keep building from here, so that we do have a more productive members of society coming home to a family and community that really loves them and really wants to incorporate them into the community again.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lance, for sharing. And I think I'm going to kick it over to my colleague, Ben, because I think we're going to open up to some Q&A for the panel, if that's where we're headed.
Yes, thank you, Katie. And thanks to everyone who's joining us in the audience right now. We're going to, like Katie said, transition into the audience Q&A portion of the panel. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen in Zoom, there should be a Q&A box. If you have any questions for any of our panelists, feel free to put them in there. And I have a few that I can kick things off with to kind of get the ball rolling. So I think given, Lance teed this up very nicely with Representative Fullwood's comments on giving time back, and given Representative Fullwood, your work in reentry in particular, I guess a good first question to start out with would be, how will these workforce and education credits benefit the reentering citizen community in particular?
Thanks, Ben. Lance did such a great job, and just hearing his story he just brought the point home. I think it's from an emotional perspective, if there's a system in place that will help you gain time back, I think people are more motivated, right? Now you have that carrot that really motivates you to stay focused. And so I think the work that we do, one thing I didn't talk about is some of the work that we do is pre-release. So we're in about 30 prisons and we go in and we help write release plans and do some case management. And we're working at Baker Correctional with the University of North Florida, and we're doing a warehouse and logistics training at Baker. So a lot of work we do is pre-release. So a bill like this really will help motivate some of the folks. And then the folks who are on supervision. We get a lot of folks who get out of jail, they're still in supervision. And any carrot or any incentives to keep people focusing on the right path is a big deal. So I think, again, this is a step in the right direction. And one of the things I love about this, and I think Tammy may have mentioned it, this has been a bipartisan effort. And I think anytime you look at criminal justice reform, if we're going to be successful, it really has to be bipartisan, right? Not just because, the political structure of Florida, but even if you look at all the gains in Texas, they were Republican led to where folks realize there is a significant return on investment if we invest in education and initiatives like this versus just locking people up. So the proof is out there. So the neat part is we can convince people with facts versus theory. And so that's what I love about this movement. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I think that teases up great for another question for Lance, actually. As Representative Fullwood just said, the bill received bipartisan support in the state legislature. So Lance, how do you think SB 752 aligns with conservative principles, and why do Republicans support reforms like this one?
Yeah, so bottom line is we want to have, like I said earlier, we want to have that good, vibrant society, and if we're just putting people away, they're not going to come back and be a good, productive member of society. Most of the time, they're going to get madder or worse when they go in and they don't have something to focus on to come out and better themselves. So when it comes to conservative values, second chances are the number one thing. Like, you're supposed to love your brother, regardless of who they are. That ideal carried me through the prison system. And the reason that I was able to get through the system without ever having to worry about anything, I was never fearful of my life. I never had to worry about any kind of issues or anything, was because I went in there with the idea of these are still people, and for a conservative value to have, a Christian background, but also, we want to make sure that we're covering our public safety. And when it comes to public safety, a reformed person, someone that has gone through the system and has had an opportunity to outgrow whatever it was that led them to incarceration in the first place, those are the people, and that's the conservative values that we stand behind, or at least I stand behind, about giving people those second chances and really having a redemption story to, look, you made a mistake. How do we make it better? How do we have you come back and become that productive member of society and really give back to the community? I was a spoiled punk kid when I went into prison, man. Like, I did things that, I didn't think there was going to be repercussions for. I wasn't out slinging drugs or robbing banks or anything, but I still, I could have done some improvements, So I was able to go in from my values and really see, like, this can, number one, this can happen to anybody. So whether you're conservative or liberal, doesn't matter. My issue specifically can happen to anybody. But number two is just really focusing on what is that core value of conservatism, and it is making sure that we have good people and that we are able to love one another, bottom line. So that's why I think we are able to get some of this, the working between the two parties to move forward, is because better people make better society. And if we keep putting people away, they're not going to get any better.
Thank you, Lance. We're starting to get some good questions from the audience, so I think we'll jump into the Q&A box. And so this is a great question for Tammy, and I'm sure other panelists might also, once Tammy's done answering, have some thoughts on this as well. But Malachi is asking, would mental health treatment for the probationer be considered during the accreditation process? And mentioned that some other states are already doing these kinds of things with reentry treatment.
If it's a treatment program, and especially if it's one of their conditions, no. If it's a treatment, like if they're getting a degree, some kind of degree, or it's apprenticeship program, then that would count as the educational credits. But just like a treatment, even if it was a 26 treatment program, that alone, no. It's got to be some kind of accreditation or like apprenticeship program or something of that aspect to qualify for those credits. And especially like if it was a court order condition to obtain mental health treatment of some form, no, that doesn't count. Does that answer the question? I want to say Lance has got one of those stories that we like to call success story. And, you know, I think Rachel mentioned it earlier, 40% don't make it, but I think we have to look at the numbers, 60%, which is the majority. They do complete supervision in Florida. And, you know, and those out of those 60%, 90% don't return to either institution or any form of supervision with us within a 3-year period. So I think those numbers are phenomenal. And Lance also had the things, you know, he made the choice to do better. And that's, you know, some of the things we encourage on supervision, to have the positive attitude, to, you know, want to better themselves, to improve and take responsibility for their actions. So it, you know, it clearly is a choice, because, you know, a lot of people think, you know, probation officers are, you know, simply out to violate their supervision. Trust and believe, we would much rather type a successful completion letter than to write up a violation report. And if we have to get to that, it's usually something, you know, a non-compliance issue, and it's our job to report that. So, you know, well done, Lance. I applaud you. Good story.
Thanks, Tammy. I think the next question is a good fit for Rachel, actually. So John was, I guess, wants a little more information on the educational programs that are going to count towards accreditation. So he says one of the presenters mentioned only trade programs are eligible for the education credits. And then I guess wants some clarity on, was that correct? Or are there any educational programs that are available for those credits as well?
Thanks, Ben, and thanks, John, for that question. So it is more than just vocational. It is GED, college courses. It does have to be completed, whatever the course is, but the Florida Department of Corrections will be the agency that decides whether it counts as an education achievement credit. So for example, if there's like a vocational certificate that's maybe focused, maybe it's an OSHA training, will that count? Like, they'll be the ones that make that determination, but the ones we know for sure are, you know, receiving a GED, a high school diploma, college certificate, an associate's degree, and any vocational programming. But, you know, Florida Department of Corrections will then have the say so if there's other certification programs that they allow. Obviously, like you mentioned, participation in the programs in general helps to reduce recidivism. So we hope that it will be as encompassing as possible, as long as people are making that effort. But there does have to be, you know, a certificate of completion to provide to the probation officer showing it was completed. And then they're eligible for the 60 days.
Great, thanks, Rachel. And I think actually the ending of that could lead us into another good question that we got. So what if people want to know, what do they need to do to earn these credits? You mentioned what they need to do for the educational credits. Maybe we can talk about the workforce ones.
Sure. So the workforce credits, so the bill went into effect July 1 of this year. And so starting on that date, if you are on supervision with the Florida Department of Corrections and you were working July 1, you will be, and you continuously work for those 6 months, you'll be eligible to receive those credits in January. Obviously, if you started supervision a little later. So really anyone that is working full-time and can show proof of that, whether it be through a pay stub or documentation from a boss, it again provided to your probation officer. Your officer will be tracking those hours when you come in. You just bring that in and you'll be eligible to receive the 30 days off after the 6-month period.
Great, thank you. So I think we have enough time to do one more question, maybe for each of the remaining 3 panelists. So maybe let's start with Tammy. You touched on this a little bit in your intro that you gave to the topic, but how can these new provisions in SB 752 benefit probation officers?
Oh, that is a good question. Because nowadays everybody's favorite radio station is WIIFM, What's in It for Me. So for the probation officers, they can essentially, it gives them another tool, I think, as Rachel said, in their supervision technique toolbox to motivate the folks on supervision to complete these programs, get a job where they can earn these credits and simply, shave some of that time off their sentences. So, that's a win-win for the person on supervision and for the officer, because if an officer has, 90 cases under them, if they can motivate and get their people on supervision to take advantage of these programs and earn these credits and, bring in the documentation and for the employment credits, like I said, it's a win-win for the folks on supervision to lessen those time and, those ones carrying those high caseloads. And because those numbers, we just don't sit and take a piece of paper when folks report in. They have to come in, we see them in the field. We have, if you got 90 cases and you're doing pre-sentence investigations and violation reports and you're having to go to court and just all the job duties, even the most experienced probation officer can be overwhelmed. So if we can incentivize these for, folks under our supervision, like I said, we have 146,000 people on some form of supervision throughout the state of Florida, and there's only about 2,000 of us. So yeah, if we can encourage folks to take advantage of it, and we have the resources for them. Like I said, we have the remote reporting, we do alternative sanctions. There's about 12,000 of our folks doing remote reporting already, and those numbers are going up. We probably had about 8,000 folks in the alternative sanctions, the merit-based activity. Those are the people that are on community control, which is essentially house arrest. They can earn up to 4 hours a month, and that's a very strict form of supervision, it's house arrest. But they can earn 4 hours a month to, go to a family outing or something like that that's normally not approved, as long as they're in compliance. So, the motto, or at least my motto, is that I used to tell people when I had a caseload is just do what you got to do so you can do what you want to do. If you want to keep it that simple, but that's the way that officers can look at it to help reduce their workload.
Thank you. Yeah, we all love a win-win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Representative Fullwood, what do you think the passage of a bill like SB 752 means for the future of criminal justice reform efforts in the state of Florida?
By the way, before I start, I need to hang out with Tammy more because she has some great sayings. I'm going to steal this WWIFM radio station. And
you can borrow it.
Yeah, and do what you do what you have to do what you want to do. That one, I know I butchered that one, but
that's my theory.
Yes,
I live.
We appreciate you, Tammy, and all the good work that you're doing. I think I said it a little bit earlier, Ben. I think that this is a great step. It's a big step in the right direction. And I was meeting with soon-to-be Speaker Renner. This was like a year or two ago. And we were talking, and he was just really reluctant about going super hard with reform because he brought up some good points. We have to consider victims, we have to consider public safety, things of that nature. So I think, again, it's really getting people comfortable with the reform and how practical and how it makes sense. And I think that's what we're doing. And sometimes we're a little slow in Florida, But I think that we're moving in the right direction, and I think people, it's people will benefit individually, but I think we'll benefit as a community as well, because the sooner we can get people back to living full, meaningful lives, I think the better it is. We always say that the number one indicator for recidivism is poverty. When people aren't working, when people are struggling, they tend to go back to a life of crime or trying to figure out other ways to make money. And if we can keep people employed, get them good jobs, get them living wage jobs, it'll make a major impact on our state. So thank you.
Thank you. And Lance, I'd love to bring it home with one last question for you. You mentioned the phrase second chance, I believe, in one of your earlier segments that you were speaking to us. So how do these provisions provide that second chance for people on probation in Florida?
Well, kind of like Rep. Fullwood just said, the breaking that cycle, getting away from the circumstances that lead to incarceration. That's one of the things that I advocate for more than anything, is to have those incentives, have those opportunities to not have to go back to the circumstances that led you to incarceration in the first place. I know from my own personal experience, coming home after being gone for 5 years and hanging out with some of my old friends, I couldn't do that anymore. I had to change what I was doing to get to where I'm at today. And I lost a lot of friends through that. But were they really friends at the time? So like making sure that I made the right decisions. And so a program like this, the opportunity to find a pathway through, rather than just going back and it's the whirlpool of criminal justice. If you're on the edges, you can sometimes get out, but once you get sucked down into it, it's really hard to get out. And so for someone that did 5 years in prison and 5 years on probation and tried to find jobs, I still have an issue today. I just moved to Tampa this year, couldn't find a place to live because I have a felony on there. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But the bottom line is, I took advantage of my second chance. I hope to be a voice for people to see that taking advantage of the second chance can lead to a better life. And this program, this bill moving forward, shows that not only does the state actually care about people like us. I remember being in the reception center in Miami, Florida, when I first went into prison, hearing about some of these reforms back in 2006. And I stood there and was like, I don't even care about this news story because that's never going to happen. There's nobody out there that actually cares. Here I am almost 20 years later, the person I didn't believe existed. So to see these things that are happening over the past, 10, 15, 20 years, to be moving forward and to actually be making a difference in people's lives and in our communities, the bottom line of a second chance is you have the person has to take advantage of it, but people like you guys also have to be able to present something that's going to break that cycle. And this is a great first step forward.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our panelists for those wonderful answers. Before I hand it back to Katie to wrap things up, I just wanted to do a little plug for Reform Zone storytelling efforts that we try to do. So Reform believes that narrative change is very important around the issues of parole, probation, supervision. So what we like to do is in states where we've implemented bills like this or helped pass bills like this, we share success stories from people who've benefited from these reforms. And then in states where we haven't tackled the legislative challenges yet, we want to share stories of people's experiences with maybe the gaps in the system or the flaws in the system that we could address in the next go around. So if you, anyone in the audience, if you know someone or you yourself have a story to share about an experience with parole and probation supervision, I'm dropping a link to our story collection form in the chat right now. So feel free to circulate that, fill it out yourself, share it with people in your network who may have stories to tell. And I'll hand it back to Katie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. And thank you so very much to our panelists for all contributing today and also being just really instrumental in getting this bill past the finish line. It was a few years in the making, as Rep. Fullwood mentioned, and I don't think Reform Alliance would have been successful if not for the groups that had already carved out the space and really cleared the field. And all of you had a hand in that, AFP, Operation New Hope, and of course, PBA. So thank you all so much for helping us out today to educate about this bill, because these credits people need to know. We do have two more coming up. The next one is going to be in 2 weeks, Senator Perry, who opposed, our Senate sponsor originally from Northeast Florida, who I know Rep. Fullwood knows well, and also Tanane Jenkins, who you also know, who's a graduate of the Operation Hope program, will both be speaking. And then, of course, October 11th is the final one, which will be Leon County and West. So feel free to join us for those. Share the links with your friends and your colleagues. You can, and you can also revisit these. They will be recorded and accessible to you. I also want to thank all of the groups in the Florida Safety Coalition that I've already mentioned some, but Americans for Prosperity, Operation New Hope, Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, Florida Cares, Florida Policy Institute, Alliance for Safety and Justice, Right on Crime, and the Public Defenders Association, and of course the Police Benevolent Association, all had a very heavy hand in getting us here and keeping those educated about these. So thanks so much to everybody, and thanks for joining us. And that's all I got.